This video will be talking about working in two-dimensional sketch tools, as well as what the difference is with working with three-dimensional extrude style tools, what our origin is in our CAD modeling space, as well as the difference between blue geometry and black geometry, what that means for your work, what exactly is a plane, and the most efficient way to use your dimension tools. Cue the intro music and the flashy stuff. Boom, boom. Mr. Barbercheck CAD class. Know your sketch toolbar from your feature toolbar. You've got your two toolboxes. We call them toolbars in the software, but you can think of them as toolboxes you are actually going to be reaching into and out of. And one of those toolboxes is for your sketching and your flat work. And one of those toolboxes is for your three-dimensional growing work, clay work. Tip number 2, know what the origin is. This is a defined point. This is an origin. This is a point of reference. You can take measurements from this point. It is a consistent point across. And even if we add the negative space, it still gives us a point to measure from. And you'll see the same thing in CAD, and you'll want to know what the origin is. Know the difference between defined and undefined geometry. In your 2D toolbox, when you're doing your sketch work, you need to know the difference between blue geometry and black geometry. So these red lines you could think of as a graph, an x-axis and a y-axis, and on that graph I have plotted two circles. The blue circle right now has nothing telling it what to do. It doesn't have to be so far from the origin. It doesn't have to be so far above the origin. It doesn't even have to be any particular size. But this circle right here, this circle has limitations that it has to comply with. Must be 2 away from the origin. You must be 2 above the origin. You must be a size that has a diameter of 2, obviously not drawn to scale. This circle can't move left or right, can't move up or down, and can't change size without violating these rules. It is fully defined. And the blue sketch is what we would call undefined. Tip number 4, know what a plane is. I thought we were covering planes. Not this type of plane? Okay. So what I mean by plane, actually, not the flying object, but the plane you could think of as the canvas that you drop your two-dimensional work, draw your two-dimensional work. So let's look at it in the context of this room that I'm in right now. Let's say our default origin is the corner of the room, and our default top plane is the floor that I'm standing on. Our default front plane is the wall right there, and then our default right plane would be the wall. Definitely sketch on the floor, I can sketch on the wall, and I can sketch on the other wall as well. But I can also sketch here in space. And what I mean by that is, this is another plane. Besides your front, top, right default planes, you can create a plane in OnShape, a whiteboard anywhere in space, and you can sketch your two-dimensional sketch work on that plane. Tip number 5, know how to steer the dimension tool. Have our circles, we're sketching them on this plane. Use the dimension key. Remember, we've got a blue sketch, so these are free floating orbs that can go wherever. We're going to use a command in our CAD software, and maybe has a ruler icon next to it. This is called our dimension, and you depress that tool, it'll kind of darken in tone so you know that the dimension button is on. I bring this up because this is a very common mistake I've seen. The dimension button's on, the student's gone in and said, all right, circle, you have to be 2 inches away from our origin, and you have to be 2 inches away from our origin in this direction as well. With that button push, it will continue to dimension until you hit that button again to turn it off. Start seeing a bunch of gray numbers popping up. It's because you have this button on and now you're over dimensioning. It doesn't need to know that this is two more than once. It only needs to know it once. So if you see a gray number pop up, it's probably because you need to remember to turn this button off. Another thing to remember when you're using the dimension key, strategize where these dimensions end up, because they will get messy and they can end up right on top of each other or right on top of your part when you're trying to do your work later and the dimensions are in the way. You can click and drag that number and spread things out in a nice, organized fashion. Click, slide, click again, enter. That is a good way to use the dimension tool. Pretend this one's not here. Make sure the dimension button's on. Click, slide the cursor towards where you want this dimension to be. Click again, enter, good to go. And now we know more about our 3D sketching toolbars, our origin, difference between blue and the black geometry, where our planes are. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Cue, exit music, explosion, smash like, subscribe stuff. Boom. See ya.